Hey, everybody, and welcome to our last week of class. Just two more of these videos to go, and I can hear you applauding from here. Um, and they'll both be relatively short. You'll also be happy to hear. Um, Today, I just basically want to go over Number the Stars as our first example of historical fiction. And then Thursday, our last video will deal with Towers Falling. I've gone over the criteria for historical fiction. I've talked about the final exam. I've talked about the final paper. So there's not a whole lot more left for me to do here, except, as I said, go over the two books that we have remaining this week. So it'll be a relatively quick video. And since it is, I might as well give you a number right away, 77, as we get started. So 77 is our first number. And we are joined today by the kitty. Hey, kitty cat. Can you show him your face? Anyway, so there's Charlie for his many fans out there. All right. So today, like I said, I want to go over Number the Stars. Let me start, though, by explaining the homework. So let me put that up first. Okay, there we go. All right, so, oops, what did I do here? Arranging the screen so I can see it better. All right, so these are the assignments that are due by midnight on Wednesday, August 7th, before Thursday's final video. Obviously, watch this lecture and take note of the numbers. So I've already given you one number, 77. And then include those numbers in the very brief homework assignment I'm going to ask you to do for Numbers Falling, which I'll get to in a minute. So your assignment for early this week is to read Towers Falling. It's about 9/11, and we'll talk more about this on Thursday, but uh, it kind of amazes me that enough years have passed now that most of my students, if not all of my students, have no first person memory of 9/11. And that's mind boggling to me. So for many years, I mean, I had students who could remember where they were. It's one of those events where if you were alive and you were old enough, you remember where you were when it happened. And, in some cases, students were pretty young when it happened. So this book is particularly, I think, relevant to that generation, but your generation probably has no first person memory of it. And I guess the biggest, I don't know, event in your life that's comparable would be COVID. I mean, you are the COVID generation. That's going to be one of the things you're going to probably tell your kids and grandkids about years from now, what it was like during COVID. We'll talk about all these kinds of things on Thursday, but read Towers Falling. I think you'll find it interesting. Also in the Canvas, there are a couple of articles I'd like you to read dealing with Rhodes, who is the author of the book, and she has some interesting comments to make, not only about the book, but also about historical fiction in general, which I think is really, really relevant, obviously. So read those articles, and then you'll find a list of questions on Towers Falling, uh, similar to what I asked you to do for Number of the Stars. Read through all the questions. I think they would be good preparation for you for anything I might ask you on the final exam about Towers Falling, or anything I might talk about during Thursday's lecture. But there's only 5 questions that I would like you actually to write out answers to and turn in for homework. You'll see that those are the highlighted questions. I think they're pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to put them up on the screen. If you have any questions about them, let me know, but I think they're pretty self-explanatory. And so answer those questions for a 20-point quiz, and that's what you'll turn in to me before midnight on Wednesday with the numbers in our sequence. And let me give you another number real quick, number 18. 18 is our second number. So that's the homework. One last book to read this semester, and one last brief homework quiz, if you will, to do this semester. I'm trying to keep things light for you because, again, I realize that, well, you may have other things to be working on. You may have other classes to be working on, and you may be starting to get ready for fall semester. I mean, we just have 2 more weeks before that starts. So I'm trying to keep things light for you. And I encourage you again to, if you haven't already, start working on your paper. And if you have any questions about that in the next few days, let me know. And so as a result of that, just a few reminders. Again, the final exam will be Saturday. I will post it on midnight Friday. You'll have the entire day Saturday to take the exam. And when you're done, you'll turn in your answers by email and by midnight Saturday. So that's the absolute deadline. Okay. And then Sunday is when the final paper will be due. And you have until midnight Sunday to turn that in. And as far as grading goes, I probably won't need too much time to grade your exams. Exams I can grade pretty quickly, but the papers do take me a while. So I would give you a little bit more time on the papers, except that we have to have the final grades posted and finalized by next week from next Tuesday by midnight. And so I'm going to need a day or two to grade all the papers. So obviously that's what's coming up this week. Saturday will be the final exam. Sunday will be the final paper. And again, if you have any issues or questions, particularly about the final paper, let me know in the next couple of days over email or by email or whatever, and I can help you in any way I can. All right, so that's what's coming up, both immediately, towers falling, and then for the end of the week, this coming week, we have the final exam and the final paper. And I'll be reviewing this a little bit more on Thursday's lecture, which will be our very last lecture. I won't be talking at you anymore after Thursdays. So there you go. Okay, so hopefully there aren't any questions about that, but if there are, let me know. All right, let's talk a little bit about towers falling. I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself. A little bit about Number of the Stars. I'm actually recording this on Sunday evening, so I haven't had a chance to look at everybody's answers to the quiz questions. And of course, a number of people haven't turned it in yet because they're not due till midnight. But I thought the best way, obviously, to go over this wonderful example of historical fiction would be to go over the questions I ask you to look at, and then also, obviously, the ones I ask you to answer. So let's go through those. Let's take a look at those as I put on my glasses. All right. Here are the questions. And one of the questions I didn't ask you to answer in written form, but I think is important to talk about, is the age appropriateness. Obviously, a subject like the Holocaust is one in which we have to be particularly aware of age appropriateness. And thankfully, there is no shortage of great examples in literature dealing with the Holocaust that span all ages of readership, from really the very young to obviously the adults. And so it's important, again, to consider the age and grade of the child in determining this. Obviously, first person uh, accounts such as, well, somebody like Elie Wiesel's Night, which a number of students have told me that they read in school, but didn't read until they were maybe in junior high. I don't think you would try to have a child read Night. And again, because of age appropriate issues, might be very, well, would be very, very disturbing. But there are a number of works that are geared toward younger students and younger kids, like what we're dealing with in Children's Lit, that deal with the Holocaust. I think Number of the Stars is a great example. I mean, it doesn't sugarcoat things, and it doesn't, shy away from what happened. But on the other hand, it's not too vivid. It's not too disturbing. You understand the dangers that they were facing, and characters do die in the story. But it's something that I think is presented in a way that I think children can read. At least I would say at least into the fourth, fifth grade, which I think most people kind of agree with. And I had, like I said, people who have read Number of the Stars, and they said, I read that in grade school, Mr. Shank, and we didn't have any issues or problems with it. We understood the story. I think it's uh, written for that age group as well, and it's a very quick read, very easy to read. And again, it's a good introduction to the Holocaust, and we save the more disturbing graphic aspects of it maybe until they're old enough to handle that kind of thing. Usually in a class discussion, I usually ask students if anybody took the field trip or the school trip to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. I think they still do that. And a number of students told me that they did. And if I had you guys all here and I could talk to you about it, I'd probably ask you the same question. And the experiences and the feelings about the experience kind of vary. Again, depending on age appropriateness. I've had students tell me, well, we went to the Holocaust Museum when we were like in the sixth grade or the seventh grade. And I don't know, that might be a little bit too young to fully appreciate what that means and what it's all about. And whoops, excuse me. And I had students tell me, yeah, I mean, I think we were too young. I don't think we really fully understood what we were seeing. Um, so again, age appropriateness, very important, particularly when we're talking about something like the Holocaust, where over 6 million Jews were exterminated, not to mention millions more around the world who died in World War II, including, many, many Americans, to end the kind of fascism that led to the Holocaust. So it's one of those devastating occurrences in our history. Very few people who lived during that time were not affected in one way or another, or didn't lose someone they knew, someone they loved, or someone they knew, somebody in their family because of this. I did ask you to answer examples of children's lit that deal with the Holocaust, maybe that you're familiar with. And from the ones I'm reading so far, I mean, a lot of people bring up The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. A lot of people read that in school. The Diary of Anne Frank, of course, is a classic, and usually one that's read by kids. Some of the others, The Book Thief is another one that's very popular in schools and usually read in grade school. Salt to the Sea, Between Shades of Gray, other books like that. And here's where I'm going to share with you something I didn't realize this until a couple days ago. I was going through the Canvas, and there is a file that deals with what I'm about to share with you, but it no longer worked in Canvas, so I had to bring it up here. I think I've referred to the website A Mighty Girl, which is a wonderful website that introduces its readers to all kinds of literature for kids, mostly directed at and emphasizing girls, but really for everybody. And this was in Canvas and it no longer is working, so I had to find it and put it back up. It's easy enough to find. Just Google uh, a mighty girl and then Holocaust, and this is what you come up with. And 60 mighty girl books about the Holocaust. And some of these you're probably familiar with, but some of them you may not be. And again, notice some of the age and grade, recommended age 6 to 10. So even as young as 6 to 10 can get an introduction to what happened. Now it's been like 80, almost 90 some years ago when it first started. Um, so I just thought I would share these with you. Some of them are a little bit older, 8 to 12. Maybe some of these you're familiar with. So if this particular era interests you and you'd like to read more examples that are geared toward a younger audience, I encourage you to do that. You know, the titles are very intriguing, aren't they? And they give you options where you can buy these from Amazon, or I'm sure you could probably get them in your local library. And most of these are relatively recent too. So this is a kind of a subgenre that has continued to grow in recent years. And what I love about Mighty Girl, again, is that they compiled all these for us in one place so we know where to find them. All right, so I thought I'd share that with you. So there's no shortage of great examples of that. All right, the setting obviously is Copenhagen, Denmark, 1943, and this is several years into their occupation by the Nazis. Denmark was occupied by the Nazis for many years. And this story, I think, very realistically depicts what it must have been like to live under these conditions and these situations. Um, Number 8, I always think is an interesting question to pose maybe to kids today, just to maybe help them relate a little bit to what they had to go through as kids way back then. When you are an occupied country, obviously your occupiers uh, get all the good stuff and ration everything else for you. And that's pretty much what happened in Denmark. So I made kind of a list of things, and I'll leave it up to you. It would be kind of interesting to ask kids this, how upset would you be if you were deprived of these different things, or you were rationed these different things? And it's kind of interesting that Anne Marie's little sister, Kirsty, of course, doesn't remember a time when they weren't occupied. So she's almost fascinated by the idea of, things like butter and sugar being readily available, so that, uh, there was a time when you made cupcakes. Oh, cupcakes must be wonderful. And of course, she's never had, the privilege or the pleasure of having that. So no butter ration, sugar ration. They limit the times when electricity could be used. And I'm just wondering how a 21st century child would deal with that. I think that would be something very difficult, obviously. Other things, well, this wouldn't apply to children. I hope it wouldn't. But of course, there's no tobacco or very little tobacco, so no cigarettes, um, no alcohol available. And that might hurt me personally. That might be the last straw for me. What? No booze? You're gonna occupy us, but you're not gonna let us drink? Uh-oh. I'm gonna join the underground. I'm making a joke, but anyway. So no alcohol, no tobacco for the adults, no tea, no coffee. Oh my God, no coffee? Oh my God. I don't know how many of us could survive that. Um, Although they make do, which is one of the interesting things about the story. Um, they don't have coffee or tea, but they put herbs in hot water, and that's kind of what they do. No coffee, no tea. So there's any number of things that they either have to do without or are heavily rationed. Another one is no leather. So again, Kirsty, uh, a growing girl, she needs new shoes, but there's no leather for shoes. So fish scales are used. And I guess this is based in fact as well. And of course, they must have felt terrible and looked even worse. And she's upset about how badly they look. But what do? They use ink black and they at least make them black so they're at least presentable looking. But can you imagine? I mean, no leather for shoes. So I think one of the realistic things based in fact is the fact that the people of Denmark, the Danes, had to somehow survive without some of the basics that we just take for granted in our world today. Um, I'm going to get to some of these other ones in another discussion. 15, uh, again, so many of these things are based in fact, in reality, and these are the kinds of situations that would have happened. But there are any number of times in the story where there's a crises moment, right? And it could have gone either way, but in there, well, it shows the power of human beings to, first of all, be strong and be brave and be courageous when called upon. Also, be ingenious when called upon, to find a way to uh, escape the situation or get the better of the people who are threatening them. And there's any number of examples of that. Uh, like I said, the story is a real page turner. Almost every chapter, there's some moment where you wonder what's going to happen, and there's danger all the time. And if the wrong word is said or the wrong decision is made, they could be in great jeopardy and they could die. And that's not just the Jewish people in the town, but also those who might seek to protect them or help them. So a number of you mentioned early on, the Nazis go from house to house looking for, obviously, Jews that might be hidden uh, by the Danes. And one night, when Ellen is with them, a German comes in and looks at Ellen, the Jewish girl. And of course, she looks very much different from the Danish girls uh, who and she's posing as one of their sisters. But the father, again, quick thinking, goes to an old photography book of photos of the children when they were younger. And he points out that here's the baby. This is a young girl who had dark hair. This is Ellen. Now, of course, it was really Lise, Anne Marie's older sister, who we find out is killed by the Nazis. She was a member of the resistance. We find that out later. Of course, Anne Marie did not know the exact details of her death, just thought she died in a traffic accident or was hit by a car. With more to it than that. But the father, very quick thinking. Another example involves, the non-existent great Aunt Bertha. Remember that scene where a number of people are getting together, and of course, any crowd gathering is going to draw the suspicion of the Nazis, but they are supposedly having a funeral for great Aunt Bertha in its closed casket. And of course, inside the casket are clothes and other supplies for the Jews who are going to be transported. And again, Germans show up, and you wonder, oh my God, if they open up the casket, they'll see what's inside, and it's not great Aunt Bertha, and all of them would be sent away to be killed. But again, in this case, the mother, Mrs. Johansson, is very clever and says, well, she died of the typhus, and of course that's very contagious. But if you want to go ahead and open the lid, you go right ahead. And the Nazi goes, no, 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 I don't want anything to do with it. Very disrespectful of her and of Mr. Johansson. And they have to kind of bite their tongue and hold back their anger. But they pass through that very, very tense moment, very, very dangerous moment, again, with clear thinking and with courage and bravery. Um, then, toward the end, Anne Marie has her opportunity uh, to show bravery. And what I love about this too is this seems to me to be one of the main themes of the book too. You know, we 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 like to think that we would be brave and we would be courageous when called upon, but we're never quite sure if we are able to do that. And I think one of the things the book shows is that everyday people can be heroic when the times demand it, when the circumstances demand it. And Anne Marie says, I always wondered if I would ever be as brave or as courageous as some of these people who are in the resistance, like Peter and so on. And then she finds that she has a very important role to play, delivering, the basket to her uncle, and she's stopped by Nazis again. And she very cleverly says, and she doesn't know really what her role is and why the basket is so important, but she knows that it is. So she's very clever, and she says, "Well, I wonder what Kirsty would do. I'll act like Kirsty. I'll just pretend like I'm this flighty, innocent little girl and who doesn't know what's going on." And that works for her. And they end up not being suspicious. And so she did her small, well, not so small, she did her part in the resistance effort, delivering that basket to her uncle. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Uh, but very clear thinking, courage under fire. I think Hemingway said courage is grace under pressure, uh, doing the right thing. And, later she gets a lesson from her uncle. She said, I was petrified, I was terrified. And, he says basically what I think we've all heard before, but maybe never had a chance to see in our own lives. Courage is not the absence of fear or being afraid. Courage is going ahead and doing what needs to be done, even though you are afraid. And that's what she does. And she passes with flying colors. So, you know, any number of times in the story, and I think most of you will probably pick out those circumstances where we are literally talking about life and death situations, and they were able to rise to the challenge. Okay, things that are based in fact. Uh, for this, I'm going to go to the afterword. I remember when I first read this book, I was a little dubious. I thought, well, it's a fictional story, so certainly she must be making up some of this stuff. She's embellishing things or whatever. But she did her homework, and Lowry, uh, based this story on a number of different things that really were true and really did happen in those times. So I want to read a couple of passages for you. Well, first of all, I think this is a great a passage talking about her talking with her uncle after it was all over. Um, and, of course, her uncle works for the underground and has a boat. And we find out uh, in the afterword that just about all of the Jews who lived in Denmark were successfully transferred to Sweden by boat. And, the Germans, after a while wondered, how are they getting away? They were very suspicious. And yet they were able to do this very successfully. And Uncle Henrik talks about this, talks about what was in the basket. Um, the Germans had the trained dogs to sniff out human smell on the boats. And of course, if they smelled the humans, then they would find the humans in the boat. Um, The dogs are trained to sniff about and find where people are hidden. It happened just yesterday on 2 boats. Those damn dogs, they go right through dead fish to the human scent. And of course, the fishermen tried to cover the scent with the scent of dead fish and so on, but the dogs could smell through that. It was Peter who took the problem to scientists and doctors. Now, this might be one fictional aspect as far as, giving, this role to a particular character in the story, but it actually did happen. They actually did do this. They created a special drug. I don't know what it is, but it was in the handkerchief. It attracts the dogs, but when they sniff at it, it ruins their sense of smell. Now, thanks to Peter, we will each have such a handkerchief, each boat captain. When the soldiers board our boats, we will simply pull the handkerchiefs out of our pockets. The Germans will probably think we all have bad colds. The dogs will sniff about, sniff the handkerchiefs we are holding, and then roam about the boat and find nothing. They will smell nothing. So again, how do we get around the sniffing dogs? Well, this is our solution. Very clever. And then, they talk about her role and what she did. And if she had not found the packet where Mr. Rosen had dropped it, if she had not run through the woods, if the soldiers had taken the basket, all these ifs, I mean, everything could have gone the other way, and we would have had tragedy. But instead, he assures her that yes, the Rosens and the others were able to get across, and now they are safe. And it was in large part due to the role that she did. All right, and then 17 kind of gives an aftermath of what happened. The war does end 2 years later when Anne Marie was 12. Oh, by the way, let me give you a number here, 42. 42. You also get some sad news. Peter Nielsen was dead. He was executed for his role in the underground. Then she learns something that I usually have a discussion about this in class, something that apparently her parents chose not to tell her until after the war, and that is how Lise, her older sister, died. Oh, Papa, Anne Marie cried, Mama, they didn't shoot Lise, did they? The way they did Peter in the public square. Mama said some of them were shot. Do you remember that time when Peter's arm was bandaged and in a sling at Lisa's funeral? He wore a coat over it. She remembered that. But then she does find out that the Nazis deliberately ran Lisa over with a car after she had been at a meeting where she shouldn't have been, breaking curfew, et cetera, as part of the underground. And I usually ask this question in class. I didn't ask it as part of these questions, but you have to understand that the parents had a decision to make. Do we tell Anne Marie how her older sister really died? And probably decided not to, simply because she's a child and she might act out against the Nazis who were all around on every street corner, right? And that would just cause trouble for them and cause great danger for them. So better to tell them it was an accident, and then afterwards, after she's old enough and after the war's over, to actually tell her the truth about what happened to her older sister. All right, and then the afterword helps answer the question, how much of this is based in fact? How much of Anne Marie's story is true, as Lowry brings up? She said most of the story is made up, but she also tried to imagine what life would be like in Denmark in 1943. And she read some accounts, including some accounts of young people. A couple of things that are based in truth. The Free Dansk, which is the underground newspaper, a free Denmark. That was the underground newspaper that Peter had which would give the information of what was going on. Another thing that's interesting and very true to life is uh, people in the resistance only knew what their particular small role in the larger picture was. And Uncle Henrik kind of points that out to her and explains that to her. You had this small job to do. You didn't even know why it was important or what was in the basket that was so important. Because knowing what it was would have affected you. So each of us only knows what we need to do specifically. And of course, that is to guard against, capture. And if you were captured, if you were tortured, to give more information. You couldn't give any more information than what your particular role was. So that's why they did that. So that's also very true to life. Other things that are very true to life, there actually was a King Christian X who did ride every morning on his horse as a great show of hope and strength to the Danish people. And you have to wonder why the Germans allowed this. Why wouldn't they just, take him away and shoot him or whatever? Uh, they must have decided that, that would have been more trouble than it's worth. So it's kind of like, well, let them have their king. He's no threat to us. So let him ride on his horse and give them like a false sense of security and whatever. And that will help keep them maybe, mollified, and they won't try to strike back at us if we allow them at least a few of their, things that mean something to them, and their king meant quite a bit to them. So it's kind of a symbolic thing that he rode through the town, but that actually was true. They actually did also blow up their own navy when it became obvious that they would be uh, occupied by the Germans. They didn't want the Germans to use their boats for their efforts, so they actually blew up. They didn't have a big army, navy. They didn't have a lot of ships, but whatever boats or ships they had, they destroyed, so the Germans couldn't use them. That's based in fact. A couple of other things. She says a lot of people learned about what was going to happen beforehand. Uh, the rabbi knew because a high German official told the Danish government, which passed the information along to the leaders of the Jewish community. The name of that German was G.F. Duckwitch. And I hope that even today, so many years later, there are flowers on his grave because he was a man of compassion and courage. So even, occasionally one of the Germans would break ranks and do the right thing and alert the Jews to their danger and help save many of them. Kind of reminds me of the story of Schindler's List, if you've ever read that book or seen that movie. Again, a very, very powerful movie about the Holocaust. Uh, and so the Jews, all but a few who didn't believe the warning, fled the first raids. They fled into the arms of the Danes, who took them in, fed them, clothed them, hid them, and helped them along to safety in Sweden. And again, almost all of the Jews in Denmark were saved, were eventually transported into to Denmark across the way. Nearly 7,000 of them, it says. Again, the package with the drug and the dried blood to deaden the smell of the dogs, that's based in fact. She writes, they created a powerful powder composed of dried rabbit's blood and cocaine. The blood attracted the dogs, and when they sniffed at it, the cocaine numbed their noses and destroyed temporarily their sense of smell. Almost every boat captain had one of these. Again, very, very clever. They came up with this solution to this problem. And she mentions too that Peter Nielsen, although he's not a real character, so to speak, he's kind of a composite of all the young men who risked their lives to help save Jews in the underground. And remember, these weren't Jews. These were Danish citizens who took it upon themselves to save the Jews from this horrible fate. And in many cases, they lost their own lives in that effort. And she brings up a particular person named Kim Malthe Brun, who whose story inspired her. And he's one of several young men that she read about, who she bases Peter Nielsen on. And she quotes his farewell letter before he was executed. He writes, "And I want you all to remember that you must not dream yourself back to the times before the war, but the dream for you all, young and old, must be to create an ideal of human decency, and not a narrow-minded and prejudiced one. That is the great gift our country hungers for, something every little peasant boy can look forward to, and with pleasure feel he is a part of, something he can work and fight for." End of his quote. And then she ends the book with this: "Surely that gift, the gift of a world of human decency, is one that all countries hunger for still." And in 2024, I made the comment, uh, somebody wrote their presentation on a book about the Holocaust. And I said, people say, why are we still reading about this? It's 80, 90 years ago. It's ancient history. But, fascism still lingers. I mean, we'd like to think that, World War II was the great war, and it defeated fascism, but did it? And we still see remnants of it today. It's the kind of ideology and it's the kind of attitude that we see signs of everywhere still, and we have to be ever vigilant. And I think that's what Lowry is saying here. I hope that this story of Denmark and its people will remind us all that such a world is possible. Amen to that. All right, so any number of things that are based in fact in the story, which makes it a great example of historical fiction. And the other thing that makes it a great example of historical fiction is it's just a great story. It's really exciting and interesting, and it's all the more so knowing that this kind of thing really could have happened during that day and age and during that particular time. So Anne Marie is not a real person, but there were a lot of Anne Maries there, and there were a lot of Peter Nielsens, and there were a lot of Lisas, who gave their lives for the cause, and were very successful in saving almost 7,000 of their fellow human beings. It didn't matter to them that they were Jews. They were fellow human beings, and they were in danger, and they needed their help, and they received their help. All right, so a wonderful example of historical fiction. I hope you enjoyed it if it's the first time you've read it. If you read it before in school, I'd kind of be interested to know when you did, what age and grade, and maybe how it was taught. If you could maybe shoot me an email about that sometime, I'd be interested to know, because usually I have students say, yeah, we read this in school and we enjoyed it and whatever. And I think it's a really good introduction to the Holocaust, which is a terrible event in our history. But like I said, it's not history, in the sense that we still see the same kinds of things that led to the first Holocaust in Germany and spread throughout Europe. I think we still see aspects of it in today's world, and we should watch for the signs of it and try to fight it whenever we find it and whenever we see it. Okay, so that's my little bit on Number of the Stars. And again, I hope you enjoyed that book. And let me give you one last number. 63. 63 will be our last number. And Charlie has moved. Can you see where is it? Moved out of camera range. Anyway, okay, so read Towers Falling, which obviously is a much more modern day story. Although it blows my mind that it's now been what, almost 23 years ago since that happened. Like I said, before a lot of your time. But I'm sure you've heard about it, you've read about it. It's also a very sensitive topic because of all the different, I don't know, politics involved and et cetera. So one of the things that you'll be asked, and we'll talk a little bit more about on Thursday, is how do we approach a discussion and an explanation of what happened on that terrible day? It was a Tuesday, if I remember correctly. I'll never forget it. We'll talk more about that. So anyway, have a great beginning of your week, and then I will see you on Thursday, and best wishes. Here's me blown up. I gotta, okay, here we go. All right, take care, everybody.